Hey everybody, it's Gloria here, and welcome to Getting Real with Gloria, where my journey supports yours. I'm really excited about this episode today and to have on a friend, Colleen, from my writing circle. We're going to talk about all things writing today and how writing can really be a great skill for your mental health. And Colleen's going to share a little about her experience with that. But before we dive in with Colleen, I want to talk a little bit about how we met, since I always do that on this channel. So I actually found writing, which is an incredible skill for for anyone, whether you plan to be published and do this professionally, or you just want to do it for fun, do it for that cathartic release, do it for healing. It has certainly served me when it comes to trauma and grief, PTSD, and just even self-discovery on a really personal level. So I highly recommend writing for everyone, no matter what your skill level. And Colleen and I are part of a group called the Writer Sanctuary, and it is run by two incredible writers, CJ and Mary. And I'll put the link to join the Writer Sanctuary if you're interested in the description for this channel. And we actually are part of a special group called the Red Herrings, which is sort of a secret society for writers, where we support each other on our journey with writing, really lift each other up. And a lot of us are going through personal struggles, family struggles, financial struggles. And so we do share that together. We kind of come together, support each other, as well as each other's writing. So Colleen, tell me a little bit about yourself and what brought you to the art of writing.
I think I've been writing since I was a kid. Probably third grade was when it really kind of took hold. We had an assignment where we had to create a book for English class, and of course, not my best work. I still have it, but not my best work. I've come a long way since then. From there, when I moved to Florida, I got really involved in the library system there. I became a teen volunteer, and from there, it just kind of bloomed. I got really hardcore into writing. I went to conferences, I took classes, I put on classes, I entered contests. So I think really there is where it took hold, and I'm kind of still there. My genres have changed as I've gotten older, which for most people it does.
Mm-hmm.
So what was once nice, cushy, fluffy stuff is now kind of the macabre and dark, and looking at kind of facets of mental illness within people that don't normally come across, which is super interesting to me. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at currently.
Very cool. So tell me a little bit about the genres you started in and what you're writing in today. Like, what's your current work in progress?
So what I started in was kind of, I was working in kind of middle grade fiction, just because working at the libraries, that's kind of the group that I was around most often.
Sorry, don't mean to cut you off. Middle grade fiction, just for those who might not be familiar, is what age group?
Middle grade, it depends. Typically, it's third grade through eighth grade.
Okay.
So,
and the themes, and so what makes middle grade fiction, not to take you off track, but what makes middle grade fiction sort of different than, let's say, a YA or young adult? Like, what are the themes you're addressing there, and how would someone know if they want to write in middle grade? What would they be sort of looking for?
so middle grade is kind of looking at a child. They're trying to find their place within their group of friends, their family mostly, just working those dynamics, because at that age, that's kind of your biggest problem.
Yeah, really. Fitting in is, even to this day, you're right, a problem for a lot of us, or something that we struggle with. Awesome. And so you moved from middle grade into what after that?
Young adult fiction, and right now I'm currently dipping my toes into adult fiction.
Great. And what's the divide between young adult and adult for those who might not know?
A lot of it has to do with the adult theme. So kind of the romance aspect. Young adult, it's more finding where I belong in society, kind of where my place is in the world, and kind of self-discovery. But that aspect of moving into more adult relationships. And then adult, of course, we all know what that what that entails.
And so in the adult genre that you're writing in now, do you have any niches that you really love, and what's your current work in progress? Tell me a little about it.
So my current work in progress is called What Goes Unseen. It's an adult horror story, hoping for a duology. We'll see how that goes. But it focuses on my main character, Elmira Prescott. She's got a family who is very heavy into the occult. It takes place in about the mid 1800s. So up and rising seances were coming through. We
Mhm.
have all these madams who could talk to the dead.
Mhm.
So her mom actually is one of these madams who holds
Right.
seances. She can speak to the dead. And her daughter, Elmira, has kind of gifts. She's a touch nose. So things she touches, she can kind of get impressions, feelings, hear things, maybe sometimes memories of what's gone on or who they belong to.
Mhm.
And she's met this man named Raymond, and his family, the Ashdowns, are wealthy. They've been in this area for a long, long time, but they are cursed. Everyone in the city thinks they're crazy, loony bins, but Elmira comes to find out they've actually got a ghost problem. So it's up to
Ah.
her to figure out how to end the curse because she's unfortunately gotten herself wrapped up into it and now is a target, having married
Ooh.
Raymond, who's head of this
Ooh.
family. So
Love it. Love all the intrigue, love all the suspense. And a lot of people think about horror is just that it's scary. But I know that I actually dipped into researching horror a little bit because I am fascinated by it. And I'm somebody who has lived a life of psychological fear. And so I've always sort of been also drawn to that. And I'm not a horror movie watcher or anything like that, but I am drawn to the idea of using our psychological fear as a way to grow and learn. So the horror genre is really about discovering fear and like bringing fear out in people and like what does fear do to us, giving people those chills. But also there's a deeper level. Can you talk a little about the deeper level of horror and how you have found that has actually been therapeutic for you? Because I bet that it has.
yes, very much so. I mean, a lot of my characters, yes, it's horror. There's the creep factor, but a lot of it, I want it to feel, is it in their head or is it actually happening?
Mm.
Um, for me, it's been cathartic just because there's themes of mother child, which I've dealt with the whole kit and caboodle. Uh, there's themes of, is it all in my head?
Yeah.
Is it real? Am I justified in what I'm feeling?
Hmm.
How are others perceiving me and perceiving kind of the terrors that I am describing or seeing or experiencing?
Yeah.
So it's been a roller coaster. It's led me to a lot of self-discovery, and my main character kind of, we all do it as writers. We put little pieces of ourselves
Of
in.
course. Of course.
So writing her story, it's kind of been writing my story almost.
Mm-hmm.
Her working her way through society who have not always been the best. Um, Working through kind of survivor's guilt with her mother and her sister and her father,
Mm-hmm.
working through feeling as though she is cursed
Mm-hmm.
and kind of developing her own voice, coming into her own, kind of separating herself from the stigma around not only her family, the family she's married into, but being this strong, capable woman. So,
Mm. There's a lot there. So can you talk to me a little bit about, you said that you're putting little pieces of yourself in her. What parts of you are you now sort of ready to share? Because when we put ourselves into our characters, we're obviously in some ways testing the world as to how will you perceive this, not in saying like I'm coming out with these truths, but more like my character is going to be doing this, so world, what are you going to think? What are the things that you are now ready to kind of put on the table through your character, or just even in this conversation to talk to a little bit about in your own challenges that you've overcome or are still addressing?
so one of the earliest things is survivor's guilt. Growing up wasn't exactly picturesque. I had mom, dad, my brothers, but my little brother was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, he also had anger problems. So growing up, especially as the middle child and the only girl, I was kind of left to my own devices,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I kind of turned to writing and reading. It was an escape. My little brother was in and out of hospitalizations for behavior, for attacking people, for attacking structures, getting in trouble at school. My older brother did similar things. he was diagnosed with bipolar syndrome. So it was hard. And a lot of what happened, I've kind of blacked out. I had gone to therapy for years, during it, after it. I was put on medications for depression. Nothing kind of helped. It made it kind of worse.
Mm.
All for people, if you need the medication, please find help, seek help. For me, just talking about it was not just cathartic, but I was able to work through what was happening to me, around me. My father was a little bit heavy-handed, not always the not always the best. He's come a long way now. There were a lot of things that he needed to unpack himself in order to be the man that he is today, the father that he is today. God bless my mother, because my mother's my saint. Working crazy hours, different jobs, just to have money for us. Dad was always gone on work trips. When he'd come home and wasn't in the greatest moods, he usually liked to distance himself from us, which left my mom to care for 3 young children, one of which who was experiencing temper tantrums, in and out of hospitalization visits, doctor visits. Is this medication gonna make him better, worse? I mean, you name it, it probably happened. So it took a long while to be okay and kind of accept where I had come from. I still don't have a lot of memories from the age of about 8 until 13, when everything kind of transpired and just exploded. But I've gotten better. I still find myself very passive rather than speaking up, only because I was left to my own devices. I was there, but not seen a lot, not heard a lot, because I knew that my little brother needed help. I knew that my older brother was having his own issues as a teenager on top of being bipolar, and it was a lot on my mom, and she was kind of the only one there. My dad stepped in every once in a while when he was able to, when he was mentally there and not thinking about other things, worrying about other things. So that was a struggle, still a struggle, still working through it, but come a long way. So
You talked about, thank you so much for sharing, by the way. It's hard to be so vulnerable, especially publicly. But I think that it does help when we do that, because it shows other people that they're not alone. And that if there is anyone out there who feels similarly, or even if they're just wanting to be there for someone else who is, experiencing what you did, it can help them be more informed about what the support for that person looks like. So it sounds like, there's just a lot of anger in your home, not necessarily always intentional anger, but sort of this volatile, unconscious anger.
yes.
And how have you found that writing has helped you deal with that? And do you have your own anger, and what do you do with that? Right? Because many of us who've gone through trauma, it's like that's one of the last things to go, is all that anger, because we're so used to stuffing it down. So how have you managed that?
That's been the hardest part.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is still a lot of anger, a lot of anger towards my dad, a lot of anger, a lot of anger, unfortunately, towards my little brother, who didn't have control of himself and his emotions and everything, and anger towards my mom. She doesn't deserve it, but there is anger there. Just, I think mostly because I was the okay child, and she felt it was okay to let me be. So I didn't get all that attention, but constantly reminding myself she did the best she could.
Yeah.
Did the best she could. My dad, I think he did the best he could. But yeah, definitely a lot of anger. It's still, I can feel it now thinking about it. It's still there, it's still present, but luckily I don't see them as often. So they live about an hour away from me currently. So it's a nice distance. when we get together, usually by the end of it, just emotionally drained, as I always was as a kid, just ready to be gone, ready to put it away and kind of curl up in my little cocoon that is my house with my husband and my son. But it's still there. It comes out, unfortunately, sometimes with towards my husband.
Mhm.
Um, I'm sure sometimes it comes out with my son, unfortunately. Uh, just the aggravation, just trying to remind myself, take a deep breath,
Mhm.
let it go. It's in the past. You've forgiven them, but the anger's still there. So
Yeah.
that it's a constant, I don't want to call it a battle. It's a constant reminder, I
Mhm.
guess, of what I've been through.
Yeah.
So, and then in my writing, my characters usually have a parent or something that they are kind of struggling with, seeing
Mhm.
differences. One of my other manuscripts, In the Deep Dark Wood, my main character Charlotte, she didn't see eye to eye with her mom, and then her mom disappears. So she's left with this guilt of, my mom did the best she could. My mom tried to raise me the best she could. And then her dad disappears, and that was kind of her rock. That was her person where she could lean on whenever her mom was getting angry, whenever her mom was lashing out at her or doing something crazy, because her mom was dealing with her own internal struggle, excuse me,
Mhm.
of where she fit into society because she was an orphan and she didn't have people to rely on. So that definitely has played a part, and it's been nice to see my characters grow and how they figure it out, because I feel like I can also lean on them,
Mhm.
be like, what would Charlotte do in this instance? So it's been very insightful, I would say.
So I want to ask you a bunch of questions, so much there that we could discuss. So first thing I want to ask is, when it comes to your characters, I see that you did a little role reversal in that one you just said, the Deep Dark Wood, about making the dad the rock in your story. And I wonder if, does it feel, you know, sort of healing to be able to imagine a place where that parent that didn't show up for you shows up for this character? Because I know that that's something that I'm not writing a story currently like that, but in my mind I've got a couple ideas of that, where there is, a figure that I will want to stand in for what I didn't have. And so did you find that that was the case when writing that Deep Dark Wood?
Very much so. A
What that
lot.
feel like? What that feel like to see that character, to bring them to life, to feel that sense of support that you didn't get?
It hurt at first, a
Yeah.
lot, but I
Mhm.
couldn't break myself from writing it that way.
Mhm.
For me, I needed it. I needed to see it, and I needed
Yeah.
Charlotte to have that. And even in What Goes Unseen, Elmira, her father is that rock.
Mhm.
Her mother's gone. She was tough to live with, but the fathers are the rock. And yes, it definitely comes back to my father always being gone on work trips. And when he
Mhm.
come home, he was emotionally distant. He didn't really want to hang with his kids. He didn't really want to play with them. He
Yeah.
just wanted to be his own. And for me, it was kind of healing because I could give my characters that kind of support,
Mhm.
that that male support that they really needed while growing up, and to
Mhm.
see this man or father figure just kind of fill the shoes and lift them up where a dad's supposed to.
Right.
So
And that's one of the beautiful things I think about writing, is it gives us this alternate universe to be able to play in, that does feel like it does heal the places in us where reality just didn't come through.
yeah.
And it's not, doesn't have to necessarily be like, oh, poor me, but it is a place for us to be able, like you said, to learn and grow, and to feel what it would feel like to have that support. What decisions we make differently? Would we behave in relationships differently? Will we take risks differently? I think that's kind of one of the beauties too. It's almost like when we go to bed and we dream, and our brain gets a chance to kind of play out those scenarios and try different things. I feel like it's the same when we write, especially novels where we have big character arcs, where we're thinking about like, well, what would it be like to play in this world? And what can we learn and experiment? And how does our brain, sort of come to terms with that in the end? The other question I want to ask you is, I noticed, so the mom is always disappearing and things like that. Do you feel like that for you, focusing on the mother in a lot of these works is the way that you are kind of allowing yourself to be angry, to so you're giving the mother character sort of a less soft approach than your real mother, so that you can be mad. You can feel justified in being mad.
Mm. I never thought about it before, but I think you're right. 'Cause I do portray the mothers as this very strict, very hard, aggressive kind of
Mm,
personality. And my mom is not that,
mhm,
not 100%. Very passive aggressive. She was not the discipliner. God bless her soul. Always laughing, always smiling. And my character's moms, they just got a scowl constantly
mm,
on their face. They've always kind of had weight on their shoulders. And well, yeah, my mom has weight, but she's never let it get to her like my
mhm,
character's mothers
mhm.
did. So I think in a sense, yes, for sure. It allows me to be able to shove that anger off on them rather than putting it on a person who I know doesn't deserve it. So
Yeah. And it can be hard, especially when we've been in trauma, especially as children or young adults, to feel justified in our anger in a way, like toward the parent that we know tried the hardest, especially if we have, because I have not necessarily the same scenario, but I have a similar scenario in that there was one parent who definitely was more supportive, more loving, wanted to be like being a parent was their role, was
yes.
their life purpose. And then another parent where it was clearly like, this was not in your design, like you really failed even to the outside world. So having those two parents, sometimes it can be hard to feel like your anger is justified toward that parent that was more of the savior parent in the dynamic. And I know for me, I felt that as well. Sometimes, like just feeling like it feels bad to feel angry at that parent versus anger at the other parent, you sort of start to be more comfortable with because you're like, yes, here's this that you did. And so it's an interesting thing to kind of come to terms with. And I can't necessarily say I've like come up with a solution for it, but I do think that you just at a point say, this is anger. You recognize, like you said, that it's anger you have and you're working through it. You're letting it go where you can. Some of it is still there and you recognize that. And that's kind of like the best that we can do, but also realizing that the way that we saw the world, the child that we were in that instance does deserve to be angry because even though yes, everyone did the best they could, a child always deserves the best, the best love, the best care, they always deserve that. In a sense, they're like innocents. And so they do deserve that. And so even when you try, and I'm sure right now as a parent, you're probably going through a lot of other struggles too, of like now you're on the other side and you are the parent. So it's hard, but I think the other thing too is like when we see our parents take responsibility for where they missed the mark, where they hurt us, where they, didn't see where their own baggage was, getting in the way of parenthood. I think that that's really important. And also sometimes that's the place where we say, okay, I understand. I don't have to blame you, but I can hold you responsible, because while you did not mean to hurt, you did. And so I think this is one of the things also the journeys that we go on and even can show up in our writing is just like holding characters responsible for things, as a way to almost hold other people responsible for things, even though we may not have those conversations, or we may, depending on what we need. But I think that that's all. It can be very challenging, especially I know this month is Father's Day, and and then May for Mother's Day. Like some people, those holidays can be very activating, just because you are always wishing for this wonderful, beautiful relationship with your parent. And, sometimes it's a struggle to get there. So talk to me a little bit about how your role now as a mother. And I know that you've struggled as well, with postpartum. And so talk a little bit about that road, that journey, where you've been, where you are now, and what's helped you get there.
Everyone says it's the hardest job, being a parent. I did not realize just how true that was. I've worked with children pretty much most of my life, so I felt capable being a parent. Before being one, of course, I felt like I know kids, I know how they work, how they see things, I've got this. No, nothing in my life prepared me. I love being a mom. It's hard. It's so hard. And it didn't start off great. Hospital, they induced me. I was in the hospital for 5 days, them trying to get him out and
Oh
everything.
my gosh, that's very hard.
When he came out, everything was good. But of course, I was suffering from migraines and everything because of the epidural. They had poked me like 4 or 5 times. Then
Oh,
to fix it, they poked me
oh
again.
gosh, oh my gosh.
So it was just, that was traumatizing in itself. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of mothers and just everyone in general don't realize how traumatizing that can be.
Mhm.
Just going into the hospital and the labor process and then the healing process after. I
Mhm.
wasn't prepared. I read
Yeah.
all the books. I talked to all my friends. Was not prepared. Back in your mind, you're always thinking, it's not gonna happen to me. It happened to them. Anything that could happen happened to me. So, but being a mom is rewarding. He came home and he had colic.
Oh, I had colic. I feel so bad. It's like I always tell my mother, I'm like, I'm so sorry you didn't sleep for like almost 2 years.
It was hard, very hard. My husband, he works second shift, so he leaves in the afternoon, doesn't get home until late. So my son, best time for him to have colic, 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night. And it'd go on for hours, just
Oh.
nonstop crying, screaming. I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what to do. And I don't always react well to stress. I really don't. I'd love to say that I do, but I know myself and I just don't. Um, I tried to stay calm, tried to keep composed. God bless my mother for being there. We were living with her at the time. So thank you, Mom. She would come down, she'd take him, try and rock him, try and help him, give me a break. I think one of the hardest things was coming to terms with postpartum depression.
Mhm.
I was in denial for many, many months. And thinking back, sorry,
It's
thinking
okay.
back now, if I had admitted it, things might have been a little bit different, might have been a little bit easier. Um, I think it was month 6 or 7, finally, family were going, you've got depression, you've got postpartum depression. Just everything I was feeling, it felt like the end of the world. Everything with my son felt like the end of the world. I felt like I was just failing left and right. I'm not giving him enough stimulation. I'm giving him too much stimulation. I'm not holding him enough. I'm holding him too much. Um, I'm spoiling him. But it was a lot to work through, still is a lot to work through. I found myself kind of angry at myself, and then that anger kind of turned towards him. And baby never deserves anger. Um, I kind of felt myself pulling away from him.
Mhm.
Just anyone and everyone who wanted to hold him, there you go, take him, please take him upstairs, take him to your house. I can't, I don't want to. Long time, and I hate myself for saying this, a long time I kept telling my mom, I'm gonna send him out for adoption. I can't do this. I'm gonna send him out for adoption because he needs someone who can handle him and take care of him and be better. And I just didn't feel equipped. All my years working with kids and getting degrees in adolescence, and it just, everything felt like a failure. And it felt like everyone was looking at me as a failure. And of course, you get everyone who's been there, like, you're doing the best you can, you're doing a great job. Everyone has felt that way. But with the depression, it just, at least for me, that makes everything feel worse.
Mhm.
I don't need you to tell me how, me personally, I don't need you to tell me how I'm doing things right. Tell me where the mistakes are being made so I can correct it.
Mhm.
I'm all about, let me fix it. And if it's part of my problem, I always look for the problems to fix them.
Mhm.
But it, I'm better now, especially since I came to terms with the fact that I was suffering from postpartum depression, and a lot of women don't get help for that. And they should,
Yeah.
really, really should. If you think you're suffering from it, if even if you don't think you're suffering from it, but maybe you're feeling the blues, you're feeling like you're just down on yourself, talk to someone.
Yeah.
Find someone you can talk things through with. I didn't go on any medications. They probably would have helped, but with my past experience with depression and medications, I didn't want to touch it, especially since I was breastfeeding. I didn't
Mhm.
want him to somehow get the medication into his body. Um, but it's been a roller coaster to say the least. It's still there. Uh, I still find myself angry with him sometimes, and that's because of my past. That's because of everything when he was first born and just me. I don't want to say that I'm an angry person, but there is definitely still anger there, which with writing, it's been nice to just kind of unload it,
Yeah. Yeah.
just get everything and anything out onto the page and let my characters deal with it because
Mhm.
I clearly cannot. I cannot. I'm trying, but it's been a journey to say the least.
Thank you so much for being honest and open and sharing. Because I think, like I said before, you know, this is how people, hear someone else speak. And I think it's the same thing with writing. You read someone else's words, and sometimes that's what you need to go, oh my God, that's me. Oh my God, that's how I feel. I couldn't express it before. I couldn't see it before, but now I can. So, I thank you for being so vulnerable and so open about it. And I think one of the things that's very hard, especially today, is that, you know, there's been this lifelong thing of like birth is so beautiful, and it is, birth is beautiful, but there's also this idea that birth is traumatic, right?
Mhm.
Like it is in some ways a medical trauma depending on how it goes for you, what your past history is with hospitals, with medical procedures, with anything. It's very invasive. People are in the most tenderest of places, and so there is this other component, and yet it's sort of like mothers have this expectation of your baby is born, you must love them, or there's
Yes.
something wrong with you. And there's a lot of hormonal changes that happen from the time that you become pregnant to after the baby comes out and beyond. Like there's a lot of hormone changes, and not all that, even if you are the most Zen controlled person, are you going to control that? That is outside of your control. And I think that's one of the things to, be able to look at ourselves and say, when there are times when we go, okay, our behavior, we can adjust that, I hold myself responsible for this. And when we say, you know what, I can't find myself in the storm, hey, I need help, and I think you recognized, hey, if I had seen myself in the storm faster, maybe I wouldn't have suffered so long. I think there's a lot of women that also probably have done what you've done and tried to brave it because you feel like you should love your child, like where you want them glued to you at all times, like you should want that. And it's not necessarily because you don't want it. It could be that you can't have it because there's things in the way of that bond, of that connection, which are outside of your control, which are, biological. And so, I commend you for like coming to that point of saying, hey, I do need help. Hey, this is where I'm at, because better late than never.
Sure.
Better to have to recognize. And I think that sometimes too, like especially for those of us who have been through, and I'm not a parent, I have friends who are parents who are wonderful parents. My own mother is a beautiful mother, and and has been one of those people who did, the instant her baby came out, was like latched her. She always talks about how I was the most wonderful thing that ever happened to her. Like that kind of motherly love. But I think there are a lot of different types of mothers out there. There are a lot of different ways mothers show love. There's also this idea that for many of us, you know, who have been through trauma, we don't want to repeat our parents' mistakes. And sometimes when we're so aware of them, we put more pressure on ourselves. And so realizing that you came from a home with a lot of anger, it's like, of course you would punish yourself then for feeling even an iota of anger because you're like, I don't want to be that parent.
Mhm.
But sometimes that's almost a fulfilling prophecy for us when we want to get so far away that then we don't give ourselves grace or forgiveness or compassion, because we're so strict on wanting to not repeat mistakes. But I think the fact that you just are more reflective in many ways than probably your parents were, and then their parents before them. I think if we start from a place of reflection, that's like where we get our power back for our
Mhm.
generation. and then we can teach our children and our children's children. Um, how do you feel like today? Do you use your writing at all to get closer to your son, or do you use your writing at all to explore motherhood? I mean, it sounds like yes, you've got some mother daughter issues going on in your current work in progress. So talk a little bit about that.
I mean, spoiler, in my adult horror, I plan to touch on my main character being a mother. So eventually it'll get there. I am personally not ready to touch on that aspect just because I am still grappling with it and grappling with raising my son myself. He's my first, so it's everything is brand new.
Yes.
But the aspect of like the mother-daughter relationship, like you said earlier, it's just a way to funnel my anger, I think, from my past.
Mhm.
Um, I would love to be able to write, like, incorporate my experiences of me being a mother and how I was able to work through it and the troubles and everything like that. I don't know if that'll make it into the book. I think it's still such a sore wound at this
Mhm.
point that I don't know if I can overcome that hurdle, maybe down the line.
Mhm.
Um, but I definitely do want to incorporate motherhood and raising a child. Just don't know if I can pour that much of myself into it yet,
Yeah.
even though I know it would be so helpful
Do you ever
to.
journal? Do you ever journal at all, or do you write just like without the all the expectations of having to build character arcs and world building and all this other stuff we have to do? And what is that experience like for you?
I do journal. I have entire bookshelf devoted to journaling. Um, I used to do it a lot more. Now it's kind of when the big things hit for a way just to let it go.
Mhm.
I don't use prompts or anything. It's more just anything that comes to mind, I'm putting down to paper. I do like to go back and read them once I've calmed down so that I can recognize
Mm.
what I was going through and
Mm.
where my mind was at and
Mm.
everything that was just kind of piling on to make me just combust pretty much. So that's where I journal. I know people like to use prompts and things like that. I don't like to be told what I should write or here, focus on this, because in those states where I find journaling most helpful, I just need to pour it out.
Yes.
It just needs to come out of me like some kind of illness, just get out, let me heal, let me take a step back, let me
Yeah.
breathe, and I'm going to reflect on it and I'm going to hopefully learn from it and grow. I'm not saying that it happens all the time. It is a process for sure, but it's an important process for me. So
Yeah, it's a journey. We're all on a journey. I mean, it never stops. So we're constantly learning and growing. And if we're not, then we're probably not here as humans anymore. So that's it's all part. I know for me, I feel the same. Like prompts, not necessarily. Prompts can be helpful, but I haven't found prompts to be where I channel anger. At least I do like to get that. For me, it's poetry. I'm a big fan of like writing poetry when I feel like there's anger that's old, that's stale, that needs to be on the page. For me, the poem, for some reason I like that sense of urgency in just like its quick lines, and I feel like it's coming out of me in these like short bursts. So I'm a really big fan of that. And there's lots of other ways too to channel anger. I know, like for me, I did a lot of like screaming in the woods. Like that was big for me. I think just activating your voice, especially if you've been someone like you and I who haven't always had a voice, activating your voice and really feeling the power and the strength behind it, not necessarily even aimed at a specific person or even an idea in your head, but just that primal letting go. I know that's for me been, I didn't realize I like that so much, but I do. The other thing that I often do is like animal sounds. So like sometimes I'll just, be in the shower and I'll be angry and I'll just like start snarling like a bear. Like I just need to take on that more primal aspect of, um, my DNA, and just go ahead and allow myself less so to be confined to how we're supposed to be in society, and more like wild. And
Yes.
I think that that's one of the things that we struggle with today, because we have, we're all natural human beings with natural human emotions, and anger is one of them. And so we're asked to contain that anger, especially, historically as women, we've been expected to contain that a little bit more, maybe a lot more. And so, containing that anger, like you said, can be like where you just have to get it out because it's a pressure cooker. Sometimes it explodes on other people because we don't get it out. And I know for me, that was something that I dealt with too before I did a lot of my cognitive behavioral processing work. And before was diagnosed with PTSD, I would like explode accidentally, every so often, not often, but every so often. And then you feel the guilt, you feel the shame attached to that. So it's like the cycle. Now there's more internal anger. So, we build all this internal anger, and then eventually it's like, psh, and then once it goes out into the public, we build it back up to ourselves. So, after doing a lot of that deep dive exploration, I definitely was able to then feel a greater sense of fluidity in anger, which I think is one of the things that, like, if I could strive for anything, it would be that, like, fluidity in anger. Because that to me, like, we're always going to feel angry at some point over something. And to be able to just recognize, like you said, recognize it on the page and then let it go, that's the healthiest thing for us if we can, if we can get there.
Yeah.
So, are there any other tips or thoughts or resources for anybody out there that could be, struggling with either postpartum depression, or just, general trauma, and then trying to be a parent, and reconciling that?
Talk. Just
Hmm.
talk. I'm a horrible internalizer. Everything gets internalized.
Hmm.
My husband could tell you, she don't talk. She don't talk to me. She don't talk to anyone. She's very quiet. But let it out.
Yeah.
Let it out. Let people hear it, because sometimes you can't recognize it. Sometimes you're too close to it that you don't realize you're going through something that perhaps even has a name. And sometimes
Yeah.
just naming it is just a deep breath,
Yep.
like, oh, I have a name to it now. I can Google it. I can talk to a doctor. I can see a
Yep.
therapist. I can even just my group of friends, I can just let it go. I think that is incredibly important, excuse me. Um, I think that the stigma around mental health and around therapy and things like that is coming down.
Yeah.
Uh, I am so excited for that, because people who really need the help, perhaps before, didn't seek it, like myself,
Mhm.
because of the negative connotations to it. But you don't have to be ashamed of it. You don't have to be scared of it. It is in place to help you. There are people around, not just in your family or your circle of friends, to help you, who have the toolkit that you need in order to help yourself, help your family, and live your best life. So I think that's an important message that most people hear, but it doesn't kind of resonate. I know it didn't really resonate with me, and I was in therapy for years. I was on depression medications. We had family therapists come to the house, and still, when I was faced with postpartum, it all went out the window because I was too close to it,
Yeah.
until someone very close to me, my sister-in-law, was like, "You've got postpartum depression for sure." And that's when it was like, "Oh, okay." And even then, it still was a struggle, but
Yeah.
yeah, talk it out,
Yeah. Yeah.
find a way to let it out. Don't let it fester.
Yeah. I think too, when you get a name for it, it does make you feel like, well, that means it's not just me. I'm not the only one that has this, which is sort of a common destructive thought that we can have, is like, I'm the only one, no one understands. Like, it's all me, it's all in my head, or,
Yeah.
what's the world going to think when they see this? But then when you say, oh, it's this, you're like, oh, so there's other people who've gone through this. There's other people I can talk to. There's plans of action for this. Oh, there's research on this, there's knowledge about this. And it makes you feel more secure. It does make you feel more comforted and more supported. Um, what's some advice you have for people out there who might want to start giving writing a try for either therapeutic purposes or with the intention of being published and sort of having their voice heard and making themselves seen in the world? Because I think that's one of the cool things about writing is like it does make us seen, like especially if we publish, we are seen. And I
Mhm.
think for me, writing my first book, my memoir, which is, still shopping for an agent, but we will get one. That writing that memoir and that experience, and then knowing that it's going to go out in the world, like that for me, I'm so gung ho about it because I think that element of being seen is important when you haven't been seen before. So talk about any advice you have for people who maybe aren't writers, or feel like, oh, I could never do that because I'm not a writer. I don't know. I didn't go to school for this, or whatever. Folks, I didn't go to school for any of that either. And
Either.
so, yeah, Colleen neither. So what's your advice?
Just start. I mean, even if it's just you have a post-it note and you jot down a few ideas,
Hmm.
or you sit yourself in front of the computer and you're staring at a blank page, that's okay. I spend a lot of time daydreaming. A lot of my ideas come from daydreams. I still consider that writing. If you're looking to really dive into it, you can check out local communities. There's writer groups all over and now all over the web. We all are welcoming. I mean, we're all in the same kind of spot where
Yeah.
whether we're published or not published, we're still experiencing writing, sharing it. That's
Yeah.
the scariest part, sharing it. But I think just dive in. There's nothing to be afraid of. You might think, oh, this idea is just not going to get the reaction I want. So what if it doesn't? Someone will feel the same way as you. Someone out there needs to hear your words, needs to see your
Mhm.
story and experience what your characters are experiencing.
Yes.
Even if it's poetry. I was reading, I think it's called Love, Liars, and Vampires. It's a poetry book, and oh my God, I was never really into poetry, but it hit me. Just, I
Mm.
needed that at this point in my life, in my season. I needed that. So somewhere, someone needs to hear your thoughts, see your ideas. So don't be afraid. I think that's the biggest hurdle, is understanding that we're all afraid.
Yeah,
We are
it's
all
true.
afraid
Everyone
of
wants to
the
have that
reaction we
idea.
might get.
Yep.
um, but put it out there, put yourself out there. You need it as much as they need it. And
Yep.
I think you'll find that people are more receptive than you really think they are. That's what I found. People are very welcoming. You're gonna get the one or two people who are like, eh. There's more people out there who are like, yay.
Right.
So just dive in, get your feet wet.
I agree. Just get in there, whether it's, find an experiment. I think that's a big
Yes.
thing too. Like try, if you feel like, oh, I want to write a story, okay, so start writing a story. If you feel like, oh, that feels too daunting, go with flash fiction, which is
Yeah.
like 1,000 words or less, or a micro fiction. Give yourself a word count, and then only write, 100 words or 150 words or something, or dive into poetry or nonfiction, or write a self-help book that even if it doesn't get published, like you're helping yourself.
Yes.
So there's so many different sort of genres, but then also variety within writing that you can do. Journaling is also another great way to write.
Mhm.
You can even mess with like sort of thought bubbles on a page, just writing, bubbles of what you're feeling. There's so many ways to incorporate writing into your life. And I highly recommend that everybody tries it because I agree with you. It is a way for us to process and for us to move through things. But then also, a lot of times, what we're moving through is somebody else's life raft. It is somebody else's words that then they resonate with. And so it empowers us, but then it empowers other people. And I do recommend joining a writing group because I think that it does keep us accountable. And
Yes.
also it keeps us in that supportive space because writing is a solo activity. You don't generally do it with another person, although you can co-write things as well. So if you have a friend and you both want to co-write, go for it. And I'll put links down to our writer group, the Writer Sanctuary, as well as the Red Herring membership. I'll put that into the description because we do have a fabulous group of people, a lot of whom, you know, do share both their writing, but then also their personal struggles. And so I think that there is this beautiful blend of written word, but then also sort of love language all tied in together. And so I highly recommend our group. That's how I met Colleen,
Agree.
wonderful person who I can now have on my channel. So anything else, Colleen, you want to say today to our listeners?
I hope that my experiences help someone. I hope that you feel more empowered, whether with your mental health or whatever you're going through in your season, or just wanting to write. So that's all I got.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. It was lovely to hear from you, to hear your story. It was so inspirational. And everybody, get out there and get writing. I'll see you all back here soon again, Real with Gloria.